This young boy is one of the most depraved young killers that I have ever covered. I'm True Crime Caitlin, and this is the murder of Karen Dewar. Karen did not have the easiest start in life. When she was born, it was found that she had a hole in her heart, and doctors didn't think that she would survive for very long. However, she not only survived, she absolutely thrived in life. She was a very talented Highland dancer and entered several competitions, bringing home bronze and silver medals. Karen was an only child, brought up by her parents Alison and Frank to be a very good-natured, well-mannered, respectful girl. She was described as a very likeable, lovely girl who was always happy and smiling. She was an amazing friend because she was such a good listener, but she was also a chatterbox too. Karen was very caring. She had 2 pets, a dog named Sandy who she loved to take on walks, and a cat named Bobby. She would devote a lot of her free time to spending it with her grandmother, either helping out with chores, going out shopping together, and they really enjoyed playing either bingo or dominoes together as well. In 2004, Karen enrolled on a childcare course in college in hopes that she would be able to secure a job as a nursery nurse when she was older. This was her dream job. Because Karen was so kind-natured, she had absolutely no problem befriending a boy who had just moved in along the street. This boy had already been mingling with Karen's other friends, and it was very clear that he was lonely. He had no other friends or anything like that. And Karen felt quite sorry for him, so she had no problem befriending him, trying to make him feel liked and more comfortable. This boy was 18-year-old Colin Evans, and I can guarantee that if Karen knew who this boy really was, she would have stayed far away from him. Colin was originally from Aberdare, South Wales, but he moved up to Scotland with his parents when he was still very young. As Colin was getting older, he began what would become a cycle of very disturbing crimes and getting into trouble with the police. In the space of 6 years, from him being 10 years old all the way up to him being 16 years old, Colin had been accused of 14 separate sexual offences. Some of these included a sexual crime aimed at 2 girls who were under the age of 16 when he was only 12. Only a few months after this, he attempted to lure a young boy out of school. Colin had forged a note from this boy's parents, and the note said, like, you've got to go with Colin or something along the lines of that, but thankfully he was intercepted. He didn't manage to successfully lure this boy out of school. And one woman would even say that she had reported Colin to the police over 45 times because he was stalking and harassing her 8-year-old son. I think at this time Colin's about 14 or 15 years old. Because of the floods of reports that they were receiving about Colin, he was sent and detained at kind of like a boarding school in Ayrshire, Scotland. And from here he could only visit home on the weekends, but every weekend when he was coming back, he was going back to this 8-year-old boy and continuing his harassment. Colin was eventually made homeless, and he was housed in an accommodation specifically for homeless people in Port Fife, which is where today's case takes place. Despite this move though, police would still receive several reports about Colin. One neighbour had actually reported him to the police after they had noticed that Colin would just stand at his front window stark naked and watch kids as they were playing in the street, and allegedly this officer had told the neighbour that was calling that Colin was free to do whatever he wanted in his own house. And despite everything that I've just told you all, after Colin was rehomed, he was basically left to his own devices. Social services very sparsely visited him. He was never reviewed or anything like that. He was just essentially dumped in Tayport and then left, which is scary considering how dangerous this boy is. This boy is very clearly a danger to other people and young children. On the 20th of January 2005, Karen had had enough. She and her friends had all had a bit of a falling out with Colin, and he was still continuing to kind of shout to them and harass them in the street, so she rang the police to make a report about this. For an unknown reason, Karen arrived at Colin's house, which again was just down the street from her own, and when she entered, she would be the victim of a vicious attack. According to Colin, we don't know how credible he is, so take this with a pinch of salt. He was drunk and Karen had arrived to the house and they got into an argument. He, quote, lost the plot, and this is what triggered the sadistic attack. Colin began to beat Karen. He flung her off a table, forced her to strip naked, continued to beat her. He then strangled her with his bare hands. Then, using a knife, he began slashing at Karen's head, her face, her body, and he even cut some of her hair. Then, using a ligature that he had tied around her neck, Colin dragged Karen down the stairs and dunked her head under a bath that was full. She was already dead at this point. Using a bread knife, Colin then attempted to decapitate Karen and dismember her. When he was unsuccessful at this, he stuffed Karen's naked body. She was naked apart from a pair of underwear. This underwear wasn't hers though, it's unclear whose underwear it belonged to, but he stuffed her into this bin head first. He doused newspaper in coconut oil and then set the bin alight. This night, Karen was actually supposed to do a babysitting job. She was due to come home to collect an overnight bag that she would take to this job with her, but when she didn't show, her parents began to worry and they reported her missing that very night. Her child remains would be found down a secluded path at around 3:15 a.m. the following morning by police. And I believe this was only around 100 metres from her home. By that evening, Colin was arrested and charged for Karen's murder. I did try to find some information on the investigation or how they got to Colin, but I couldn't find anything. Despite initially denying any involvement, 18-year-old Colin Evans pled guilty to the murder of 16-year-old Karen Dewar at Edinburgh High Court. During his time in the courtroom, he would be sitting and he would be smirking. He showed no remorse and he didn't provide any sort of motive as to why he killed Karen. He would be handed a sentence of life imprisonment with a minimum of 17 years to serve. Since her murder, Karen's family and many people in the community have very openly spoke and expressed their disappointment about Colin just being dumped in Tayport with no supervision, no visits or anything to kind of regulate him and make sure that he wasn't getting in any trouble. He was a danger to society and he had been since he was 10 years old, yet they just let him go on about his life despite the imminent danger that he would cause. In March 2022, 36-year-old Colin had requested to be transferred to an open prison in preparation for his release. However, this request was denied. He is incarcerated in a prison in the south of England to be closer to his family, who after the murder moved back to Wales. In a recent article, Alison, Karen's mum, spoke about Colin's request for freedom and said, quote, "I can't bear the thought of another family having to go through this nightmare. I'll write as many letters and speak out as much as I can if it means he never gets released."
In the moonlight, my honey, I know with the dawn that you will be gone, but tonight you belong to me. Way down along the street, how very, very sweet it would seem once more just to dream in the silvery moonlight. My honey, I know with the dawn that you will be gone, but tonight you belong to me, just a little old me.
Hi loves, naglaro ka rin ba ng nanay-tatay nung bata ka? You will never hear the nanay-tatay rhyme the same way again kapag pinanood mo itong teaser trailer ng Nanay-Tatay. Nanay-Tatay is an upcoming Pinoy family horror film. Yung kwento nito may demonic presence sa loob ng bahay nila na inuutusan silang gawin ng mga bagay-bagay. Kumbaga ginagawa silang puppet ng demonyo. Kapag sinabihan silang tumakbo, kailangan nilang tumakbo. Kung utusan silang saktan ng isa't isa, wala silang magagawa. Ang theory ko, may isang object o rebulto sa loob ng bahay nila na possessed by the devil. And it caused an infestation of demonic thoughts sa loob ng bahay nila. Maybe the trailer wants us to believe na yung antagonist ng pelikulang to ay yung nanay at yung tatay. At yung magiging twist, yung anak pala talaga yung pasimuno ng lahat. Or we could also look at the angle that maybe the parents are abusing their children. At para makaganti sa mga magulang nila, nagpapasok sila ng demonyo sa loob ng bahay, possibly to regain control over them. The casting is really interesting kasi we can associate the cast based on the roles that they've played before. So may association ka na that these people can be the villains, ito yung mga inosente, but maybe they just want to lead you on. Habang tinitingnan ko yung poster, bukod sa nanay-tatay, parang naririnig ko rin yung kanta na Dollhouse ni Melanie Martinez. There's something really sinister about this family, parang may tinatago talaga sila. Alamin natin kung ano yung sekreto nila kapag mapanood na natin itong nanay-tatay. Sobrang naintriga talaga ako sa teaser trailer. I really hope nanay-tatay delivers on its promise.
Y'all want a room tour? Absolutely! Starting off in the top corner, I've got my picture of Captain Spaulding actually signed by Sid Haig. I've got Eli Roth's back director's chair actually signed by him too. I've got the McDonald's trick-or-treat pails. Unfortunately, they're not the old ones, they're the new ones, but they're still really cool. A bunch of cool posters in the back, including Ghost, Halloween Horror Nights, one from Spookalla, and then also a Brainbuster one. My various Blacklight Funkos chilling here. A little pre-made Jack-in-the-Box that I made for a short movie. My printed canvas picture of Jack the Clown. This whole back wall of posters ranging from Bill, Goosebumps, more Ghost, Terrifier 3, Halloween Horror Nights, my little canvas thing of Friday the 13th, my signed Ice Nine Kills picture, signed by Spencer, my signed Art the Clown picture by David Howard Thornton, who was Art the Clown, the little Terrifier 2 barf bag, next to some Chuck E. G fuel, next to Beetlejuice, and next to the hand from Talk to Me. Next to my poster of Slappy is my Late Night with the Devil poster. Couple issues of Fangoria, my album of The Number of the Beast from Iron Maiden, more Fangoria, my copies of Son of the Slav from Aaron Beauregard and also Count Crowley. Another Goosebumps poster. This specific poster was done by a guy named Skipper Haas. It's like a combination of the Grimace Shake and the movie The Stuff. More Fangoria. My Mad Ball of Freddy, sitting in my glass mug from Night Owls, resting upon Halloween 3 Season of the Witch, one of Aaron Beauregard's books, and also Monster Squad VHSs from Brainbuster. A Tall Man Funko sitting next to my Art the Clown head. A VHS copy of The Stuff also from Brainbuster. A little Late Night with the Devil TV guide gifted to me from Shudder and IFC Films. An original VHS copy of Phantasm. My little plushy yellow guy from Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared. My Halloween Boglin. Art the Clown Funko next to my little Audrey 2. Find a copy of Aaron Beauregard's The Slob next to a plushie of Shorty from Killer Clowns from Outer Space. I've also got my absolutely haunted monkey playing cymbals, and my little masked Season of the Witch kids. My original Goosebumps copy of Welcome to Dead House, signed by R.L. Stein, and then my VHS copy of The Haunted Mask. And I got a commemorative picture at my time at the 13th floor with the guys from Welcome to Creepy Camp. Follow them, they're awesome. My wife, chilling over there, and of course, I'll Stab Ya, who's really fun at parties. Now, as far as the lighting setup goes, it's actually pretty simple. Every single light that's currently around me, lighting me, is one of these. They're literally just LED bulbs. Literally, the best part about these is that they're relatively cheap, they can clip onto about anything, and they can plug right into your wall outlet and really not take up that much electricity. Which means you can plug a lot of them in. Now, that same exact front light that was currently lighting my face is literally just that same exact cone light with a garbage bag wrapped around it. It's got a little hole to bend out some of the heat, but really, none of these bulbs are literally hot at all. I've got one sticking on the corner here just banging up against the wall to light the left side of my face a little bit more. One is literally clipped onto a box, just kind of banging the one side to give it a little bit more of a, look. This one's currently clipped on the side to give me a backlight. This one is lighting the inside of all this stuff. And then I've got one here just lighting the entire back wall. So yeah, that's my room. Just been collecting stuff over the years and threw it up against the wall. If you got any questions about anything that you've seen, just let me know in the comments below.
Here are 5 horror movies for you to watch on your next movie night. Now before we get into that, if you love all things horror, all things spooky just as much as I do, be sure to hit that follow button. The Faculty takes place in a small town where the teachers out of nowhere begin to start acting strange. The students start to catch on and they realize that their teachers may have been infected by an alien virus. So they're now in the fight for survival and they have to avoid being infected themselves. This is a cult classic alien horror movie from the 90s. It's campy, it's vibey, and it stars Josh Hartnett. Check this one out on Hulu. Bones takes place 20 years after after the death of neighborhood legend Jimmy Bones, who returns as a ghost to get revenge on those responsible, as well as looking to restore the neighborhood back to its glory days when he was alive. This movie is super underrated, and as a little kid, I thought it was so scary. Snoop Dogg plays the main villain, Jimmy Bones, and I thought he was great in this role. He absolutely bodied it. Check this one out on Hulu as well. The collection takes place after the first movie, and we follow Arkin, who is forced to team up with mercenaries to find the whereabouts of the Collector and his warehouse. They have to put an end to the Collector while also looking to save a woman named Elena. The first movie is super underrated, and it's one of the best slasher movies to come out during the 2000s decade. This one was a pretty solid sequel, and it ramps up the killings and the action in this film. This is a solid slasher series, so check this one out on Plex. Contracted is pretty straightforward. It follows a young woman who believes that she just contracted an STD, but ends up being something far worse. Like this right here says, the movie is intriguing, it's disturbing, it's hard to watch at times. Some great body horror. Moral of the story, make sure you guys are protected at all times. Check this one out on Prime Video. Willy's Wonderland stars Nicolas Cage, who finds himself in the fight for survival against possessed animatronics. Think of something like Five Nights at Freddy's, but this movie came out first. So just imagine you fighting animatronics at Chuck E. Cheese. It may seem fun, but it is crazy as hell. Check this one out on Tubi.
Spoil Longlegs, I can do that. But firstly, if you haven't seen Longlegs and you want to see Longlegs, skip past this video because I'm going to go into great detail here. So Longlegs was released this year and was marketed as the scariest film in the last decade. The film is by Osgood Perkins. The film stars Nicolas Cage and Mika Monroe. So the movie follows Agent Lee Harker, played by Mika Monroe. So she's a young FBI agent who's been embroiled in an investigation for a bunch of weird kind of satanic unalivings. And these unalivings seem to be linked to a reclusive serial unaliver by the name of Longlegs, who is played by the fantastic Nicolas Cage. So as Agent Lee Harker delves deeper into this case, she realizes that Longlegs isn't just your run-of-the-mill serial unaliver. There is a supernatural element to Longlegs, which obviously makes him far more dangerous and is probably the reason as to why he's gotten away with this for so long. But these unalivings match all of the unsolved unalivings from the past that we know are linked to Longlegs. So all the victims are found with strange symbols that are carved into their bodies themselves. Witnesses from the past have explained strange phenomena that couldn't have happened, seeing Longlegs where Longlegs couldn't be, and that just solidifies the supernatural element in this movie. And it gets to a point where Lee Harker can't deny the fact that something supernatural is going on. The deeper Detective Lee Harper digs into this case, she starts to realise that there is a connection between her and Longlegs. At the beginning of the film, we're shown an interaction between a little girl and Longlegs, and it's not really explained until a certain moment in the film where it comes to light that the interaction that Longlegs has with this little girl at the beginning is in fact a younger version of Lee Harker. So Longlegs is captured by the FBI and he's kept in an interrogation room. Lee Harker goes into the interrogation room and Longlegs essentially tells her that it doesn't matter that he's been caught because he serves and worships Satan, confirming that these unalivings were ritualistic. He then proceeds to unalive himself by repeatedly smashing his head into the table. And before he passes away, shall we say, he proclaims, "Hail Satan." What we learn in this scene is that Longlegs just sees himself as a vessel. When he's gone, somebody else is going to take up the reins. So we think the FBI's won. We didn't get all the answers we wanted at this point, but Longlegs is no more. Everybody's celebrating except Lee Harker. The connection between Longlegs and Agent Lee Harker goes far back. Agent Lee Harker has a bit of a tricky relationship with her mum, one that is very, very weird throughout the entire film. The mum is very strange, but it turns out that Agent Lee Harker's mum was working for or with Longlegs, helping deliver the creepy dolls that make people do bad things. So Longlegs himself didn't actually kill anybody. So that's the biggest supernatural element of this film. Longlegs has a doll delivered to a certain family member who then becomes kind of possessed to do terrible things to their family. And it's Agent Lee Harker's mum who is tasked with delivering this doll to the family. And even though Longlegs is gone, Lee Harker's mum is still delivering these dolls. The work still needs to be continued. Agent Lee Harker figures out that the doll is going to be delivered to her boss, so she goes to her boss's house to try and stop the bad from happening. But when she gets to the house, it's too late. The doll's there. The family are being very, very weird. So Agent Lee Harker is stood in this living room. The doll's there, her boss's family is there, and her mum's there. Her boss's family has a little kid, and Agent Lee Harker knows that she has to protect this kid somehow. But she also knows that the family are too far gone. They can't be saved. Harker's boss goes into the kitchen to see what the wife is doing, and we hear him unalive her. Harker's boss comes out of the kitchen and she pops him off. And that just leaves the daughter, and the daughter is obviously been affected by this creepy doll. Harker is trying to protect the girl, but Harker's mum is not having it. She wants her away from the girl, away from the doll. Harker is trying to reason with her mum, trying to get her to see sense, but her mum is having none of it. She stands up and goes to attack her, and Harker pulls the trigger. Harker pulls the girl away from the doll, and then we are left with a shot of Harker staring at the doll. She tries to shoot it, but there are no bullets left. The end. So I feel like the ending to this film is intentionally ambiguous. It wants us to, one, feel uneasy, but also it wants to leave us with questions. I also think that it's kind of setting it up for a sequel. They hint heavily, I think, that whatever evil has been causing all of this trouble may have gone into Harker herself. That is never explained, but there is evidence to say that this is what's been happening. I love an ambiguous ending, and I think that Longlegs did it excellently. We're left to question whether this entire thing was a sort of initiation for Lee Harker herself, but it's safe to say that Lee Harker has been forever changed and affected by this ordeal. Whether that's supernatural or whether it is a very natural type of psychological trauma she's suffering now because of this. So I love this film. It probably is my favourite horror film from this year. It's not the scariest film this year at all. It's not even the scariest film from the last 10 years like, the promotional material said. However, I think it is going to go down in history as one of the best horror films, specifically within the past 10 years. But it will forever be at the top of many people's lists as one of the best horror films ever. Nicolas Cage in this film is astonishing. Yes, he's under a lot of prosthetics and stuff like that, but I've never seen him act the way he's acted in this film. He is absolutely off the hook. Mika Monroe is a star that we need to be watching out for. I think she is going to go on to do some very, very good things, not just within horror, but just within film in general. This film isn't as disturbing as some people might lead you to believe, or like the trailers and all the promotional stuff led you to believe. It's certainly not as scary as it wanted you to believe going into it. But what it is a very solid psychological horror movie that's akin with, the likes of Silence of the Lambs or even Zodiac. It's a very, very messed up version of Zodiac.
Whatever you're doing, stop scrolling. You have to see this video. This story was posted by Brilliant Bex 1992 on Reddit. It's called The Whistling Follower. When I was 16, I was in a choir at my high school that performed for a lot of different events around town. One of them was to sing at the middle school sporting events. The middle school in my hometown is just about a half mile from my childhood home, so whenever we had events there, I walked, because I didn't get my license till I was 17. This one night, I think it was November, we had to sing at a basketball game, and it was obviously dark. Normally, I wasn't allowed to walk alone at night, but for choir, I was given permission unless I felt unsafe. But there wasn't any reason to be creeped out at first, so I started my walk, alone. Just down from the middle school is a stretch of road with almost no streetlights that has always creeped me out when walking. I crossed quickly and had a fast pace going, as I'm a naturally paranoid person. About 2 minutes into the dark zone of the street, I heard rapid footsteps coming up from behind me. I at first figured it was a jogger, but they made no attempt to pass me and just stayed a comfortable 10 feet distance from me. Then, the creepiest part, they began whistling a jaunty tune, which I at first thought was funny. At this point I wasn't super scared, perhaps because of the happy whistling tune. But I noticed that the footsteps behind me started to speed up. There were no cars on the road, and given the lack of a light, when I turned around, all I could see was a silhouette that was shrouded in darkness. At that realization, I quickened my pace to barely under a run. The whistling continued, getting more breathless as this person began to run after me. I looked back to see a dark figure coming at me full speed, and in terror, I began to run frantically. I will never forget those last moments, running through that dark subdivision, hearing his whistling and footsteps getting closer and closer. This person followed me up to my door. I ran inside and locked the front door. I checked all the other doors and went to my upstairs bedroom. From the window, I could still see a silhouette and still hear him whistling. I slept with my knife that night.
Creepy facts that will disturb you. Sudden arrhythmic death syndrome is a condition where someone seemingly healthy dies suddenly with no apparent cause of death. No cause of death can be found in about 1 of 20 cardiac deaths. Botflies are a type of insect whose larvae burrow under your skin. During that time, you can see them move around under your flesh. Japanese giant hornets have a bite that can leave craters in your skin or even cause death. They're also attracted to human sweat, so there's a higher risk to you in the summertime. About 1 in 50 people in the United States currently have a brain aneurysm that has not erupted, and a brain aneurysm ruptures once every 18 minutes. Squashing doesn't prevent ants in your house. Ants come and collect the squashed ants if you leave them there, and they get a free meal. Ants will rarely have 5% of the colony outside of the colony at any given time.
This TikTok famous double murderer has just been handed the death penalty. I'm True Crime Caitlin, and this is the murders of Christine Melton and Diane Ruiz. In October 2019, 35-year-old Christine was out with her friend in a Florida bar, partying and having fun. She had moved to Florida from Illinois, where she was born and raised. She moved to the Cape Coral area and managed to find work as a waitress. Christine lived in an apartment, she was a cat mom, and she was also a loving godmother. She was an avid lover of Halloween. She absolutely loved spooky season. She loved getting all decked out in costume and just letting her hair down and having fun. She would be described as someone who was precious to everyone who knew her. So while she is out with her friend having a couple of social drinks on this October night, she would be approached by Wade Wilson. Wade and the two women would spend the rest of the evening together before eventually ending up back at Christine's home. Only a couple of hours later, in the very early morning, after Christine's friend left, Wade would squeeze the life out of Christine, strangling her to death as she slept peacefully in her own bed. He would then steal her car and drive away, leaving her body to be discovered by her friends or family. A little while later, as Wade is driving this stolen car, he set his sights on 43-year-old Diane Ruiz. Diane was a loving fiancée. Her and her fiancé were engaged to be married, and she was a caring mother to 2 boys. She was one of the most hard-working women that you would ever met. She was very dedicated to her job. In the whole 5 years that she had worked at her job, she had never missed a shift. Wade would pull up alongside Diane and feigned not knowing where he was going. He asked Diane directions to a local school and somehow managed to lure her into the car. Wade drove away with Diane in the car, and eventually, feeling like something was off, feeling slightly uneasy, Diane tried to get out. And that is when Wade would wrap his hands around her throat and strangle her until she became unconscious. He would proceed to brutally beat Diane before chucking her body out of the car and running over her back and forth upwards of 20 times. Wade Wilson would be arrested the following day after he confessed to his biological father father that he had committed 2 murders. His trial happened recently and he was found guilty in June, and just last night he was handed 2 death sentences for the murder of Christine Melton and Diane Ruiz. This sentence does go on to get reviewed, and it is likely that Wade will sit on death row for upwards of 20, 30, 40 years.
Adorable animals that can kill you, part 2. The swan. These elegant creatures hide a dark side. In 2012, 37-year-old Anthony Hensley was kayaking on a pond in Chicago when all of a sudden he was viciously attacked by a swan. In water, swans are much faster and stronger than you might realize, which was demonstrated when the bird swam right into the kayak, capsizing it. It even held Hensley under the water, bashing him repeatedly with its wings and holding him down with its tiny legs. The hippo. Hippos are extremely unpredictable and can move suddenly at a speed of over 20 miles per hour or 32 kilometers per hour. In 2014, a man named Dashi was fishing when a hippopotamus attacked him out of the blue, almost chomping his body clean in half. After a grueling battle, Dashi eventually managed to fight the animal off, but he soon died after due to his injuries that he sustained from this creature.
She brings her teenage daughter on this luxurious, expensive vacation, and the entire time her teenage daughter is planning her murder. Heather Mack was truly born into like the most charmed life possible. She had wealthy parents that doted on her, a big beautiful home, lavish vacations, and was truly given like the best of the best. Life certainly changed when Heather was 10 and her father passed away. Now she was really angry and violent, and she would take it out mostly on her mother Sheila. While Heather was in high school, her mother Sheila called the police on her daughter 86 times for pushing her, hitting her, punching her, biting her, stealing thousands of dollars from her, and then running away like a countless amount of times. A lot of the fights between the mother and the daughter stemmed from Heather's relationship with her boyfriend Tommy, who was a unemployed college dropout wannabe rapper. Sheila definitely did not think that Tommy was good enough for her daughter. She thought he was a loser. Around this time, Heather was described by her own friends as the sweetest person one second and then a vicious monster the next. Heather and her mother Sheila truly had a toxic relationship. It was up and down. Both of them claimed that the other one was abusive, but then they would go on these like really expensive, lavish vacations to these beautiful destinations where they would wear matching outfits and laugh and truly have a ball. It's so confusing. When Heather was 19, her relationship with her mother was at an all-time low. So as a last-ditch effort to kind of rebuild the relationship, Sheila planned this really luxurious, lavish, very expensive mother-daughter vacation to Bali. The two of them flew first class and were staying at a 5-star luxury resort called the St. Regis. But while Sheila was planning this beautiful, expensive vacation for her and her daughter, her teenage daughter was planning her murder. Heather and Sheila are now on this luxurious, expensive vacation in Bali, and while they're there, Heather goes into her mom's purse and steals Sheila's credit card. And with that, she bought her boyfriend Tommy a $12,000 first-class plane ticket to Bali and then a really expensive hotel suite in the resort that they were staying at. And when Tommy, who Sheila already really did not like and did not want near her daughter at all, shows up at the resort on their one-on-one mother-daughter vacation, it obviously angered Sheila a lot, but she could never imagine why Tommy was really there, which was to end her life. Heather and Tommy planned all of this out through text messages. They said that they were Bonnie and Clyde criminal masterminds and were really excited to be rich once Sheila was gone and Heather inherited all of her money. One night on the vacation, Tommy snuck into their hotel room with a decorative fruit bowl that he used to bludgeon Sheila to death, while Sheila's teenage daughter Heather covered her mouth with her hand, which I'm sure was so terrifying. And the entire time, 19-year-old Heather is killing her mom. She was a few weeks pregnant with Tommy's baby. Tommy and Heather then stuffed Sheila's body in a suitcase, wheeled it out of the resort, called a taxi, and then put the suitcase, which had Sheila's body in it, in the trunk of the taxi. Then they told the taxi driver that they had to go back into the resort really quick to check out, and then they fled leaving the suitcase that had her mother's body still in the trunk of the taxi. The taxi guy is obviously so confused, but he goes and gets the luggage out of his cab, and that's when he realizes that it's dripping blood. Like, oh my God, could you even imagine the horror? So he turned that in to the police, and that's where it was discovered that Sheila was inside. Their main suspects, Heather and Tommy, who are criminal masterminds, according to them, were arrested the very next day at a nearby motel. They used Sheila's credit card to book this motel room and checked in under their real names. And they would have to serve their prison sentence in Indonesia together at one of the worst prisons in the entire country. Tommy was sentenced to only 18 years in prison for murdering Sheila, and Heather was only sentenced to 10 years in prison. While awaiting trial, she gave birth to their daughter that she named Stella, and I've never heard of this before, but Heather was allowed to keep Sheila and raise her in prison. In this really not great looking prison. She was allowed to keep a newborn baby until she was 2 years old. Not only that, Heather had a really easygoing time in prison. She partied, she drank, she smoked, she slept with other inmates. She had access to a cell phone, so she would post on social media, she would post on YouTube, and was even allowed day trips where she would go out to restaurants with her daughter, just not being punished at all. 7 years into Heather's 10-year sentence, which is already not a lot, she was released early on good behavior, like partying and drinking is good behavior, whatever. Heather really wanted to stay in Indonesia because honestly, she was having a good time there. She wanted to stay there and raise her daughter Stella, but her and her daughter Stella were immediately deported back to the United States, where Heather was arrested again in the United States on conspiracy and obstruction charges and is currently serving a 28-year sentence. Her daughter Stella, who I feel so terrible for, she was bounced around so many times, raised for the first couple years in a prison, bounced by countries, and different people had her in their custody. She's currently, in the custody of a family friend, but a lot of people that want custody of Stella are using it for not great reasons. They want to write a book or a movie on this case. So I feel so terrible for her, and I truly hope that whoever has custody of Stella now is doing it with the right reasons and she's being well taken care of. Heather Mack has gotten so much leniency, I think, because of her wealth, her age, her gender, and her beauty. She is a beautiful girl, and I do not sugarcoat this at all, she scares me. She terrifies me. I think she's a danger to society, and it's terrifying that one day she will be released. I truly think that she is a sociopath who has never shown remorse for her mother, who, I don't think her mother Sheila was a perfect person, but she did not deserve that at all. It must have been really scary. And the fact that she's never been punished, never showed any remorse, and she will be released one day and probably get custody of even her child once she's released, terrifies me. But let me know what you think in the comments, because I know you guys are going to have some crazy opinions about Heather Mack.
This movie is so good and the main character in it is so smart. Let's do it. The Invisible Man opens up with our main character, Cecilia, escaping from her abusive boyfriend, Adrian, in the middle of the night. So Adrian is super rich from being an optics engineer and the CEO of a company. So Cecilia plans her escape, and one night she drugs Adrian with diazepam and makes a run for it. He eventually catches up with her, but her sister Emily is there waiting in the car and she drives off. However, she drops the bottle of diazepam. So a couple weeks pass and we see that Cecilia is staying with her childhood best friend James, who is a detective, and his daughter Sydney. And Cecilia, obviously traumatized by this man, refuses to go outside or go anywhere because she's terrified. Until her sister Emily comes over and tells her that Adrian is dead by an apparent suicide. Cecilia gets called in by Adrian's brother Tom, who's also a lawyer, and shares with her that Adrian has left her $5 million. But in order to get all of the money, she must never be convicted of a crime. So Cecilia goes home, she shares that she is going to put Sydney through college, it's like a happy moment, but then she starts to experience some strange events in the house when she's alone, and she senses that there's another presence there. She wakes James up in the night in a panic because she thinks she sees footprints. He tells her this is all probably just a trauma response from escaping the abusive relationship. Cecilia goes to a job interview one day, but when she goes to show what's in her portfolio, everything's gone. And then she proceeds to pass out. She gets a call from the doctor later who tells her that what caused her to pass out was probably the high level of diazepam in her system. And then she turns the corner and sees the bottle of diazepam that she had dropped after she had drugged Adrian on her fucking counter. So at this point, Cecilia knows that Adrian is behind this and she goes to meet with Tom and James goes with her. She shows them the bottle of diazepam as evidence and tells them that she believes that Adrian has faked his own death and has found a way to be invisible. Because he once told her, if you ever try to leave me, I will find a way to be there. You will not be able to see me, but I will be there. And she's like, he's a leader in the world of optics engineering. It is fully possible. But of course, they think she's fucking crazy. Later that night, Cecilia is super down and Sydney tries to cheer her up, but Sydney is suddenly smacked by an unseen force, and because Cecilia was right near her, she assumes that it was her. So James is obviously pissed and he and Sydney leave. So Cecilia decides to call Adrian's phone and she hears vibrating coming from the attic. She goes up to the attic and finds his phone and it gets a text saying surprise. Cecilia also finds a kitchen knife. She hears noises coming from the ladder to the attic, so she takes a can of paint and dumps it. And sure enough, it outlines this figure in this black suit. This figure, who we assume to be Adrian, then runs off and washes the paint off. And then he proceeds to attack Cecilia and a really violent fight and struggle ensues. But ultimately, she manages to overpower him by smashing plates on his head. And she's able to run out of the house and call an Uber. She then Ubers to Adrian's home. So she's investigating his lab and she's looking at this thing that looks like it's supposed to be holding something. She presses a button and sure enough, it reveals this invisible bodysuit. She takes the suit and she hides it in the house in the same place that she hid her bag when she escaped that night. But while she's in the house, this invisible figure attacks her again. She manages to escape and she calls Emily, who by the way fucking hates her right now because she received an email from Cecilia saying, I hate you and I wish you to be dead. Which obviously Cecilia did not send. But ultimately, Emily agrees to meet Cecilia at a restaurant. So Cecilia starts to tell Emily everything, how she found the suit, how Adrian is attacking her. And all of a sudden, a knife flies up and slits Emily's throat and kills her. And then the knife flies into Cecilia's hand, making it look like she did it. So Cecilia is arrested and committed to a psychiatric hospital. However, while Cecilia is here, she learns that she is pregnant. And one day, Tom comes to meet with her. Because he's like, you didn't hold up your end of the agreement, you got charged with the crime, you can't have the money. And then he looks at her and whispers, unless you return to Adrian and have the baby. So this motherfucker knows. Cecilia declines, she's like, no fucking shot in hell. And she distracts him and steals one of his pens. That night, she goes back to her room where she knows Adrian is because he's with her all the time. And she looks at nothing and she says, you can't have this baby and you can't have me either. And she starts to slit her wrist with the pen. And sure enough, an unseen force stops her. At which point she looks at him and says, got you, and stabs him with the fucking pen. So she never wanted to kill herself. This was just to lure him out. So she stabs him so many times that his suit starts glitching, so now she can see where he is. Security arrives, and they obviously are just dumbfounded by what they're seeing, and Adrian just starts attacking. A bunch of security arrives, but Adrian, still being half invisible, is able to incapacitate all of them and flees from the hospital. Cecilia, being a badass, grabs a gun and follows his ass. Outside, it's raining, so she can see where he is. However, he comes up to her and says, you are carrying my unborn child, so I'm not going to hurt you. I'm going to hurt the people that you love the most, starting with that girl. So now Cecilia knows that he's going after Sydney. So Cecilia steals a car and races to the house and calls James and says, Sydney is in trouble, you need to get home now. The invisible figure beats them all to the house and attacks Sydney. James shows up and tries to shoot him, but he attacks James and completely knocks him unconscious. The invisible figure goes for Sydney, but before he can do anything, Cecilia shows up with a fucking fire extinguisher and sprays it at him, so now she can see him. She tells Sydney to get down and just shoots this motherfucker like 6 times. So the figure lays there dead and Cecilia goes to unmask him, and sure enough, it's fucking Tom. James and Sydney are both okay. They all go to the police station, and they learn that police went to Adrian's house and found him tied up in the basement. And he's claiming that Tom was keeping him prisoner. Just realizing this is the first time I'm showing Adrian, yes, it's Luke from The Haunting of Hill House. Cecilia, though, is not buying this shit. She's like, I know it was Adrian, like he talked to me and he set his brother up. So Cecilia calls Adrian and agrees to go meet him for dinner. What Adrian doesn't know is Cecilia is wearing a wire and James is sitting outside listening to the whole conversation. And Cecilia tries to get Adrian to admit that it was him. She's like, I will get back with you, we will raise this child together, but you need to tell me the truth. Like, we need to start with honesty. But this motherfucker still denies it. But then in the conversation, he throws in the word surprise. So he's the one who fucking texted her that. So Cecilia gets emotional and she goes to excuse herself. Meanwhile, through the cameras that are in the dining room, we see Adrian take a knife and it seems like he's struggling a little bit, but ultimately he slashes his own throat with it. Cecilia comes out of the bathroom and finds him and calls 911. She's absolutely horrified. But then she looks up at the camera and backs up out of its view and looks at Adrian and just goes stone cold. And as he lay there dying on the ground, she looks at him and says, "Surprise," and he fucking dies. Cecilia walks out where she runs into James, who's like, "What happened?" And Cecilia's like, "He killed himself. I had no idea he was that unstable." But James looks down and sees the invisible suit in her bag. Because remember, she had hid it in the bedroom. And Cecilia's like, "He killed himself. It's on camera. What did it sound like to you?" And James kind of gives her an eye and is like, "Sounds a lot like he killed himself." And the two of them walk away and the movie ends.
Here are 5 horror movies that are so bad that they're good. Like, they may be terrible movies, but they're so fun and enjoyable. Now, before we get into that, if you love all things horror, all things spooky just as much as I do, be sure to hit that follow button. If you asked me as a little kid, I would have told you that Jason X is one of the best movies in the Friday the 13th franchise, but I'm older now and I can see it for what it is. It isn't a good movie. But that doesn't matter because I loved the movie back then and I still love it now. It's super fun and entertaining. The movie has great kills and a great Jason Voorhees. What more could you ask for? Now hear me, yo. Is Halloween Resurrection a bad Halloween movie, Michael Myers movie? Sure, but as its own thing, I don't think it's all that bad. Like, I actually really enjoy the found footage reality TV show concept of the movie. It brings something new to the Halloween franchise. The Michael in this movie is a step up from the Michael from Halloween H2O. I really enjoy Busta Rhymes' character in the movie. I think he's the only entertaining and good character in this film. I just think this movie is ahead of its time and I wouldn't mind seeing a newer adaptation of this type of movie with a better execution. We can all agree and admit that Texas Chainsaw 3D isn't a good movie, but like the other movies on this list, it's super fun and entertaining. Is the script good? No. Is the dialogue good? No. Does it make sense that these characters are in their 20s even though the movie takes place 40 years after the original? No. But who cares? I like the characters for the most part. I like the Leatherface that's in this movie. The movie's in 3D as well, so that adds to the fun of it. Freddy's Dead: The Final Nightmare is horrible. The Freddy in this movie is horrible. It may be one of the worst horror movies of all time for a big name franchise. But I always loved it as a kid for how silly and goofy it is, and I still love it now to this day. And it does have some good elements and moments in here that I can enjoy. And I really love the plot of this movie. I think if this was done as a scary movie, something that took itself serious like the first 3 movies, this could have been one of the best sequels in the series. For the most part, none of the movies in the Leprechaun franchise are good, but the Leprechaun himself, he's hilarious. I love how he's a villain with a personality and he talks. These movies are ridiculous, but they are a good time.
It's simple. If Heather Graham is in the movie, I watch the movie. Hello and welcome back to part 128 of my series, watching every horror movie of 2024. Follow to keep up with the series, and today's movie is Place of Bones, which came out on video on demand August 23rd. Place of Bones about this mother and daughter who live on this remote ranch, and one day they come across this wounded thief and they take him in to fix him up and get him better, but then they realize that this dangerous group of outlaws are after him because he has their money. This movie is in no way horror, and it's actually not even really a thriller. It's truly just a Western movie. And really, it's just a boring Western movie. The whole script is honestly pretty bland. I will say the only thing that is entertaining about this are the characters. I really did love each and every character in this movie. Like, they're funny, they have their own personality. I feel like they are fleshed out pretty well, but that's all it really has going for it. And I was really excited for this one because I read a lot of early reviews that had mentioned that, you know, there was this twist that happens at the end that nobody was expecting. But literally the twist happens in the last like 10 seconds of the movie, and it doesn't even really matter that it happened because they don't explore it whatsoever. They don't hint at it whatsoever. I think the writer was intending this to be like a kind of moment, but really it just fell flat. Again, I really wouldn't consider Place of Bones a horror or a thriller at all. Overall, I gave it a 4 out of 10. If you've seen it, let me know what your thoughts are in the comments. I'm curious about this.
This is everything that happened on the news today, but it's going to be simplified in 60 seconds. Neil deGrasse Tyson just completely shut down the flat earth theory once and for all with one simple response. He said that what's odd to him is that there are people that think that the earth is flat, but they recognize that the moon is round, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and the sun are all spheres. And then he's saying, but the earth is flat, so something doesn't square. This woman was just rejected from a job for asking a basic question during an interview. Okay. So basically they wrote her back after the interview and they said that they loved meeting you, but your questions were too financially oriented, all because she asked about how much she was going to be getting paid. RFK just officially suspended his presidential campaign and he endorsed Trump, which is crazy. This couple with 3 kids just discovered that they are actually cousins after 10 years of being married. I just want to know from everybody, what would you do in this situation? For anybody that cares about the iPhone, Apple just officially gave us the date of the iPhone 16 event, and it's going to be on September the 9th, so stay tuned for an update. I give you these news roundups every day, so make sure you add me so you can come back to me tomorrow.
Follower horror stories, and this one is crazy. This is from Anonymous. I enjoy your stories and wanted to share one about my grandmother who is no longer with us. When she was a teenager, she had a guy friend that she would hang out with. One day she was at his house and his aunt told them about how she could call spirits to raise tables. She told them how to do it and explained that once the spirit showed up, they could ask it yes or no questions, almost like a Ouija board. They would need to instruct the spirit to have the table leg tap the floor once for yes and twice for no. My grandmother said they tried it a few times, but being goofy teenagers, they just couldn't be serious. One day they decided they were going to make it happen. She said they sat on opposite sides of a very small table, think TV tray size or similar. They placed their hands on the table and followed the instructions. With a lot of time and concentration, it worked. They became very good at doing this to the point that they could do it with almost any sized table, and a spirit would show up within a couple of minutes. They talked to that aunt again one day, and she told them about how to make a lock of hair appear on the table off of an unalived person's head. They were excited to try this new ritual and did. My grandmother said that at the time the hair was supposed to appear, something grabbed both her and her friend's hands at the same time and threw them back off the table. After that, they never made a table rise again because that experience was confirmation that they were playing with evil. Over the years, I would ask my grandmother if she would raise a table for me to see or teach me how to do it. She absolutely refused because of what happened to her and would never give the specifics of how to do it for my own safety. She had other ghostly encounters, but this one was her absolute scariest experience. This one was just absolutely nutso. I believe this story. I feel like it would just be such a weird random one to make up. What do you guys think about it? Anyways, that's it for this one. See you next time.
Oh yeah, I am not kidding you. His glasses were identical to Dahmer and Mr. Harvey behind me from the Lovely Bones, okay? The fact that this man knew that I was alone at this gas station, that's the thing. We watch all these horror movies and shit, and it makes us aware. But when we actually go through something that terrifies us like this, I have to say real life is most certainly scarier than any horror movie. When that man came to my fucking window this morning, knocked on it, I'm sorry. All alone, my husband was at work, my kids were dropped off at school. It was what I would have considered a normal morning until that happened. And the way that this man glared at me like this, that was the scary part. I've had people ask me for money all the time, but never once to glare at me and make me feel like I was going to be attacked. So yes, immediate red flag. I bolted. Done and done. I will not be going to the gas station alone anymore unless it's an absolute necessity.
There is currently a missing teenager out of Missouri. Hello, true crimers. This is the case of Abigail Lawless. Viewer discretion is advised. Abigail, who goes by Abby, is 17 years old and she is on the autism spectrum, but is highly functioning. Abby lives here in this area in West Plains, Missouri with her family. On the night of August 17th, 2024, the family all went to bed. At some point in the middle of that night while everyone was sleeping, Abby vanished from the home. According to the family, there was a note left behind by Abby stating that she would be better off living on her own. Her parents said there was no unusual behavior from her leading up to this, no signs or indications that she was planning to run away. They have discovered that Abby may have been in contact with a man on the internet, and she may be traveling to Virginia with that man. That particular man may have been the one to take her or abduct her. According to her father, they found a package at their home that they believe came from that man from the Charlottesville area. I do not know if they know the identity of that man. Nobody saw her get into a car. Nobody witnessed any of this. So there is no description of a vehicle she may be with or description of the man. It sounds like her glasses were left behind and she is legally blind without her glasses. I know that police have been following up on leads and tips, but they have not found any trace of her yet. So she may be in the Virginia area. She may still be in West Plains, Missouri. Unfortunately, they just don't know. And so they are asking for the public's help with any information that can help bring Abby home. She is a 17-year-old child, and her parents just want her back safely. Somebody somewhere out there has to know where she is. So if you have any information about her whereabouts, please contact 417-256-2544.